Hello, South Pacific Alliance family. The month of Thanksgiving, I run on a principle based out of John chapter 8, where Jesus says, the truth will set you free. With that, the reverse is true. If truth is what sets free, it is lies that bring bondage. And so in all of ministry and leadership, as you lead your churches and your ministries, you always have to be asking yourself, is there something I think that isn't true and is hindering and preventing me to have the full blessing of God? This is the month of Thanksgiving. We celebrate Thanksgiving, and my attention is always drawn to 2 Corinthians chapters 8 and 9. And I know it's about giving, but I find it fascinating that it is generosity that produces thanksgiving. Listen to these verses. It's in the 9th chapter of 2 Corinthians, verse 6. The point is this: whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly. Whoever sows bountifully will also reap bountifully. And the essence of this principle is a spiritual principle and dynamic, and that is, generosity is not about what you have, but it's about your faith. Let me say that again. Generosity is not about how much you have, it's about your faith. And he has the illustration of the widow's mite. It's not about what she had, but the faith. And the faith, and it goes on and talks about, in verse 10, he who supplies seed to the sower. And we are the sower. So the text literally says, if you sow sparingly, in other words, if you're not going to be very generous, and the lie that sits back here, when I have, I will give. See, that's a lie. If you're not giving now, you won't give later. If you're not generous now, you will never be generous. Generosity is an act of faith. It's a response of saying, God is my supplier. In all of history, he has always responded according to your faith. And so generosity is always a reflection of faith. If you're in a ministry and you're struggling with your finances, it's an issue of faith. And it means that if you have faith and God is not providing, maybe there's a sin issue. As we can go back to Old Testament, we see that Joshua fought the battle and he lost at Ai. What? Well, there was a sin issue. But generally speaking, if you are surrendered to God, the faith produces generosity. Here's what happened to me in ministry at one of my churches, and I arrived at the church. The church had been drawing on savings. They had sold a building and had a lot of money in savings. They had been drawing on savings for 12 years. When I got there, pulling anywhere from $20,000 to $40,000, they averaged $30,000 a month, pulling it from savings for less than 100 people, living on it. And tough decisions had to be made. And I didn't know it. I was unaware of it. I had been the pastor for a year when I found out that they were not giving their portion to the district fair share. And I called Bill Malik. I said, man, I'm really sorry. I didn't know about that. Because as an Alliance church, we have said we will be part of the family. We will give 5% of our general income. I knew that, and I wanted to be a part of it. And I just said, hey, can you give me some grace? Can we kind of inch our way into it? Can we give 1%, 2%, kind of work our way there? And I'll never forget Bill Malik's response to me, and he said, well, how much of God's blessing do you want? Do you want 1% and then 2%? And I'm like, oh, Bill, I love you, man. I love you. And I went back to my elder board and I said, guys, how much of God's blessing do we want? And they all said, we want all of it. And so we began to give our district fair share. And it was that year that we ended drawing on savings and started to actually operate within our own means and finish in the black. Why? Because generosity is a reflection of faith that God will supply our every need. Now, we need to live within our means, and so sometimes we don't have God's supply because he has supplied for us to do what he wants us to do. We spend it on other things. That's a different mistake. That's a management mistake. And so we need to go before him and live within the God-given means to do what he has called us to do, not what we think we want to do. But generosity is always a reflection of our faith. Secondly, generosity, we find in verse 11, it brings thanksgiving. It's a beautiful text. As we move back on through here, verse 11 reflects that the thanksgiving, generosity gives God thanksgiving. And then also in verse 13, it brings glory to God. Generosity is about a reflection of faith that gives thanksgiving and glory to God. Are you generous? Or do you base your generosity on what you have rather than who supplies the generosity? Big difference on what you'll do and how you'll act and how you respond. It is always a test of faith. The righteous walk by faith. Join me this month in demonstrating a faith in God who supplies seed to the sower and being generous in all that you do and serve, that He may receive glory. Just want to remind you that the early bird for our district conference, which is April 30th, May 1st, save the dates. It's a discount if you get it and register before the end of the year for $99. Be sure to click on the link and get registered. Love you. Have a good month.